So my name's Victoria Ogden. I'm an operating department practitioner by profession, recently appointed as the practice development lead in theatres. So what we're going to talk about today, I'll just give you what our overarching aim is of what we're doing in theatres as part of the Safer Everyday campaign. A bit of an introduction and background as how it's come about. Let you know what the initiative delivery plan is, what my plan is for delivering this. Current progress, so we're in the middle of it at the moment, so just to give you an update as to where I am at the minute, how we plan to measure the success, the future, and just to summarise at the end how this whole initiative embraces and fits in within the Safer Everyday framework and ambitions. So, overarching aim of the initiative is to review the briefing and debriefing sheets that we use in theatres, review the World Health Organization checklist used in theatres, with the idea that human factors element is infused throughout. A bit of background, so why this initiative? So since its conception in 1948, the World Health Organization has had the aim of directing and coordinating international health within the UN system. So in 2008, they launched Safe Surgery Saves Lives to reduce surgical deaths across the world. So part of this was introducing the WHO Safer Surgery checklist. So the aim was to reduce deaths and harm to patients during surgery. So 200 worldwide organisations were involved in its design, and the idea that was by using a checklist and protocol, harm would be reduced. So in 2009, there was a mandate for its implementation within the UK. So this is what it looks like. So basically, pre-surgery, before induction of anaesthesia, we do a series of checks. Have we got the correct patient? Is the site being marked if it's a site-specific surgery? Any known allergies? Examples like that. Then we move on to do another check before we start the actual surgical procedure. So once again, do we all know each other? Have we got the correct patient? Antibiotics required, patient warming, another series of checks. And again, then before the patient leaves the operating room and hits recovery, have we confirmed what procedure we're doing? Is our instruments back? We haven't lost any swabs, any specimens been accounted for, etc. So you think that'd be great, we've implemented that, harm should be reduced. But in spite of this, surgical never events are still occurring. So since 2009, there's been a list of never events which happen across healthcare. There are 3 specific ones for surgery. So these are wrong site surgery, i.e. we're meant to be doing a left total knee replacement, we've done a right total knee replacement. Retained unintended foreign object, i.e. we've done a laparotomy, we've left a swab inside the abdomen. A wrong implant or prosthesis. So for example, doing cataract surgery, we've put the wrong lens in. 1 in 17,000 operations still have one of these surgical never events occurring, and that was from journal Anaesthesia in 2016. So despite the checklist, we're still having these never events. Bit more statistics. So annually, there are 129,416 untoward events within surgery in the UK. So these could be near misses, where they're nearly harmed, all the way up the spectrum to adverse events, where there's unintended injury or complication right as far as death. So 7.9 million surgical events in England each year, so that actually represents 354 incidents of untoward surgical events every day, just in England. So I thought that was quite shockingly high. So what next? We've had this WHO checklist, we should be reducing harm, but actually we've still got lots of things happening. So what happened next? So NHS England commissioned an expert group called the Surgical Never Events Task Force to investigate why. So they did their investigations and in 2014 produced a report called Standardise, Educate, Harmonise, commissioning the conditions for safer surgery. So after the report was produced, NHS England created a Surgical Never Events Task Force reference group and to fulfil one of the main recommendations, which was to create national safety standards for invasive procedures. So the idea was this should prevent never events occurring. So the structure of these NATSIPs, as they're known for short, is that there are 13 standards. So 5 of them are more organisational, so they relate to governance, documentation, list scheduling, and 8 of them are sequential steps, which these incorporate the WHO sign in, sign out, time out, which was part of the WHO checklist. So, but what's it about? So the standards, these standards, 13 standards we must meet. So a lot of them we have been doing since 2009 and we're meeting them already. But what this is saying is it goes beyond just having a checklist. A checklist is not enough. We're still having all these incidents harmed and we're still having never events occurring. So it's not just about checklists, it's not about teamwork, it's not about human factors, it's about all three. So without all three working together, we're not going to reduce those incidents of harm. And beyond the operating theatres as well, it's where there's any procedure where a hole is made in the patient's body and consent is required. So this goes beyond the operating theatres, so it's relevant to people working in endoscopy, dentistry, cardiology, interventional radiology. Okay, so the take-home messages from the NATSIPs and the reports produced in 2014 are: healthcare professionals should be educated in human factors and teamwork. Checklists are not sufficient. Safety practices should be standardised, so it doesn't matter if we're doing a gynaecology list, an orthopaedics list, if we've got different surgical team members present, we should all be doing the same thing. And safety practices should be harmonised within an organisation, so i.e. we mean they should be consistently doing it and in a way which is compatible with HSC and the procedures and the way we work here. So how did this all begin in theatres? So Mary Carey, theatre manager, and she's the lead of the Care Values Framework Principle 2, which is the aim to deliver safe and effective harm-free care, went and presented at the Insurance Corporation Healthcare Bursary. So this is an annual event which encourages HSE staff to explore projects and enhance health and social care provision. So there's a panel which judge the presentations and then award a financial bursary for those people then to go and further their ideas. So although she wasn't successful at that event, she was guided and gained the financial funding with support of Juliet Beale and Elaine Burgess to have the money to fund one person to go on a human factors training course. So I was luckily chosen to be able to go. So I went up to Manchester to a global air training. So human factors is not a new thing, it's been going on. A lot of it comes from the aviation industry, so you can see all the planes in the background. But if you remember, some people might remember in 1977 there was a big plane crash in Tenerife between a Pan Am flight and a KLM flight, and it's one of the biggest loss of life in aviation to date. And that's what started sort of the trend of human factors training. And it started in aviation. They've been doing crew resource management training, but it's now developed into healthcare. And a lot of that has come from an incident which instigated in theatres. So, the variety of people on the course. There was myself, you can see there. We had people from the fire industry, a fire inspector. We had medical director of an NHS trust, an engineer from an aviation industry. We even had people from the financial sector and retail sector. Everyone is saying actually human factors needs to be trained amongst their staff. And the idea is it's most important in safety critical industries, which obviously healthcare is. So I went on this training. It was 5 days long, very intense, excellent. Came back with a lovely big folder, lots of resources, PowerPoint presentations, very hard 5 days. How am I going to get this message across to theatres, given the time that we're all busy working in our environments? So I've come up with a 3-part theatre workshop, which is aligned with the Safer Everyday campaign. So session 1 was an introduction to human factors in healthcare. I've run one session in April, and I'm repeating the session this Friday. So I had to, from all this, pick out what I believe the modules that are most pertinent to my overarching aim. So I picked out teamwork communication, decision making, situational awareness, and standard operating procedures. A lot of what the course also taught me was how to deliver this training. So using a facilitative technique. So a lot of it is 30% I should be talking, 70% should be coming from the audience. So utilising videos, case studies from all the different industries, from aviation, from fire, and always linking it back to theatres. So that's session 1. Session 2, which I've got planned for August, will be reviewing back what we studied in the previous session, giving an overview of these NATSIPs. So it's all good how we want to conduct our WHO checklist in theatres, but we need to know what the evidence-based standards are saying. So people need to be aware, what do these NATSIPs say? And this has come from an evidence-based group. And then we're then going to go on and review our briefing sheets. And then the final session will be for us to review the WHO checklist, the sign-in, the time-out, the sign-out used in PEH theatres. So current progress, as I've delivered the first session so far to 17 people. All the nursing and ODP staff from theatres were invited, right from band 2 up to the top. In addition, staff from day procedure unit were invited, as well as the MSG surgeons and anaesthetists. So I have produced some feedback statistics which have been emailed out and displayed amongst theatres, but the key take-home messages was 100% of attendants said they'd recommend the presentation, and 100% of attendants said they wanted more human factors training. Just a few things people said that they liked and enjoyed. The fact that we're working as a group, a chance to learn and listen, informative, concise, team discussion to raise awareness of the topics. So sessions 2 and 3, the ones where we actually go on to giving the theory about the NATSIPs and then reviewing the sheets as a team, advocates the view that empowering healthcare teams in development, testing and implementation of solutions is essential to success. This is echoed by the NATSIPs, which state that the development of these standards should be done by the procedural teams that use them. It shouldn't come just from management and being sort of implemented upon people. It must be done from those that are going to use them. So how are we going to measure success? Quite notoriously difficult. So I've come up with some ideas and the ways we might be able to do this. So we could take a baseline of our current incident rates and then review incident rate periodically after completion of the initiative. Hopefully we'd see a decrease. Things a bit more of a sort of qualitative study. Can we look at a safety attitudinal questionnaire? There are some out there in existence already, asking people, do they believe the checklists improve teamwork in theatres? Do we feel we have the support of various professional groups? See what it is beforehand and see what it is afterwards. See if we've had that cultural shift. Collect stories or saves of the week which illustrate how specific incidents were prevented as a result of lessons learned from the training, and hopefully that will encourage more people to become on board with the training. You could do an internal audit, have peer review people coming in to observe the briefings, debriefings and the way the checklists are undertaken. Are we actually doing it as we've discussed as a group in our workshops? So, the future. The essence is continuous improvement. There's no point going through these three workshops, tick the box, we've done human factors training, we've reviewed our checklists, great, let's move on. There's constantly new national policy, evidence-based research, so these checklists are going to have to remain ever evolving. We can, once we've changed those checklists again, have to hold non-compliance workshops. Why are we not meeting these things? Why can't people implement them? What are the challenges we're having? Ongoing human factors training within theatres. As I said, massive manual here. I've only picked out 4 key elements which I've given in that initial session just because of time limitations and the key ones. But actually there's so much more out there. We need to keep the training going. To wider HSE, the idea is not just in theatres, it needs to go out to the wards, to all the other healthcare professionals that work within theatres. To embed it within the culture, that is just a cultural, the way our mindset is that we base the way we do things around human factors. Into incident investigations, a lot of what it's talking about is the person, the primary victim and the secondary victim. So you've got the primary victim of the patient who's had the harm event, and the secondary victim is often the healthcare professionals that have been involved in the event. That in the way investigations have been historically is often very much a blame culture, and those people often receive trauma afterwards. And actually, if we embed a human factors thinking into the way we investigate incidents, it would be for the better. So essentially we want open and transparent culture and a just culture, from right to the top level, right down to the bottom. Just to be mindful of things like organisational drift, various factors that lead to non-compliance and erosion of safety standards. So just to reiterate, ongoing education. It's not a case of we finish this year, Safer Everyday campaign's over, we're done. We must keep going. Communication, talking with one another, perseverance and dedication. I'm someone very dedicated to this, I feel very passionate about it, so hopefully that shines through. Engagement, keeping people interested, keeping people engaged. Leadership support from theatre management to chief nurse, all the way up. And as well, creativity and adaptability, keeping things fresh. So just in summary, that's the overview of what we're doing in theatres, and it's just to summarise it. I do think it is patient safety driven, so this is the Safer Everyday ambitions. It does demonstrate continuous quality improvement. It will demonstrate falling harm rates, we hope. Hopefully it will increase quality of care and improves outcomes for service users. And reflecting back on the framework as well. I think human factors is pretty much symbiotic with this framework. You know, we're applying evidence from the NatSIPs to try and do this. We're constantly going to be trying to improve the processes and measuring it over time and reviewing it, not just sitting still. It is engaging. It's very much based around teamwork and communication, and we'll hopefully collect data and learn from any errors we make and continue to improve. Thank you.
Welcome, my name is Mike Froome. I am the Community Resuscitation Development Officer, and I'm not going to teach you how to do resuscitation this afternoon because I think quite a lot of you know how to do that. And the whole idea about us all working together is a really important thing, and I think we've made big grounds on that. And from theatres to resuscitation, which I've been involved with a lot around the hospital, we've got a higher an average chance of survival if somebody was to collapse in our hospital, and we have been enhancing and embracing human factors within that training for quite some time now, and it's been making a big difference. And you're quite right, anybody who's involved with an incident or something that's happening within our organisation, we listen to what people say, and that's very, very important. Now we've got to get organisations who provide us with equipment to do the same type of thing. And I'm just going to give you one example of a human factor with a defibrillator that causes us a big problem, and that is when we're using one, because we're in a healthcare environment, we're used to using them. We know what they look like, we get practice at using them, but members of the public don't get that. They're also not used to seeing somebody collapsed who's looking very pale and very blue and is going to need some intervention from them, and it's frightening for them. So the manufacturers of a defib and the manufacturers of a projector need to link in together a little bit, because if you switch a projector off, what comes up on the screen before you actually switch it off? If you say, I want to switch you off, projector, what comes up? Oh, yeah. A little box comes up and it says, are you sure you want to turn this projector off? If you have a defibrillator that's charged and there's an off button there and a shock button there, which button do you think a member of the public is likely to press? They're probably like, and it won't say, are you sure you want to turn it off? It switches off, and then you've got to wait another minute or so, or, you know, for it to switch on, check itself, analyse the patient, decide whether they need a shock, and then they can press the right button. So we have a big problem with human factors in everything that we do. So it's all about awareness and practical application of these devices. We need people to be able to have had a go of doing it before and be aware of how to use it, how simple. And these devices are very simple to use. So what do you think my goals are? Since December of last year, I'll just tell you that I'm employed as an essential skills trainer in the Institute of Health Studies, but I'm also employed, and I don't know if you know how passionate I am about my job, but very passionate, and I'm also employed now by the governance department, and the cardiac action group are paying for me to go out into the community 2 days a week to deliver this very important training to members of the public free of charge, and it will teach anybody, whether they're nurses or carers in a residential home, to whether there's somebody in a family who's just had a heart condition, been diagnosed, and they want me to go into their house and just talk to them as a family, or whether it's a restaurant or a cafe or anybody. We'll teach this training to anybody, and it won't cost them a penny. Except for maybe, if they're a business, the time it takes for their staff to come on this training. So what I've done is created a 1 hour session where we'll go in and familiarise them with how to use these pieces of equipment. We're not saying that they shouldn't still send people on first aid training courses, because the law says they have an obligation, if they're a business and they've got a defibrillator, to actually supply first aiders who are trained in how to do first aid and do that. So if they had 100 people in an organisation, they'll send 6 people on the first aid course, and every 3 years they'll go and do an update where they get 2 days of information crammed into their head about all sorts of different medical problems and medical situations, and then they'll go away from that and they'll feel qualified, and then they don't come back for another 3 years time to do it again, and that's not good generally. So my aim is to go in and say, okay, you send your people on first aid courses, but we will train everybody else. So we went into some big companies in Guernsey, and they've asked their staff, will you volunteer to come on this training before you start work, during your lunchtime, or at the end of your work? And they all said, well, not all of them, but a third of them said, yes, we'll do that. And after doing that, their businesses have said, actually, this is so important that we're going to pay our staff now to come on this training, and we are going to make our organisation safer by buying a defibrillator and putting it in our building. Now, we've got defibrillators in our buildings for us to use, but there are some outlying areas that have got defibrillators in our buildings, and there's a lot of States Department have got defibrillators in their buildings. They're in their building. When they close their building up at 5 o'clock and lock the doors for Forsyth House and other States Departments, that defibrillator is locked in that building. What we want to do is we want to take it out and get them to take it out and put it in a box so that members of the public can access it too. So we've asked the states to do that. They said, we haven't got enough money to do it. Can you do it? Cardiac Action Group. Me, I work for the Cardiac Action Group as well. Can you do it? And I said to them, we're a charity. We haven't got any money. We just ask people to give us some funds so that we can support the community. And remember, the community is about everybody. It's not just about health and social care doing this and the community will do this. We've got a perfect opportunity in Guernsey to raise the chances of survival from cardiac arrest, sudden cardiac arrest. In England, 60,000 people every year have a sudden cardiac arrest. And members of the public don't know the difference between a heart attack and a sudden cardiac arrest. And there's a big difference. We're talking about the person who's collapsed and their heart's not actually pumping any blood out. And we know that, but they're unaware of it. We know that about half of those people who have a sudden cardiac arrest, they do this agonal respirations, this occasional gasp of air. And it's very confusing for a member of the public to see somebody like this and think, well, I think they're alive, let's put them on their side and wait for the ambulance to come. And actually they're not, they're showing signs of a cardiac arrest. So we need to make sure that we're supporting the community, and it's really good that Health and Social Care and the Cardiac Action Group and businesses are supporting us. So Kerry Olsen are sponsoring my job role for 2 years. We're their charity of choice for 2 years, and they bought us £3,000 worth of mannequins and equipment. Zoll, the company who supplies the defibrillators, had given me a defibrillator, £1,000 worth to put in my car, so that when we're out and about, if somebody was to collapse, we can say that we're a first responder, we've got a defibrillator in our car, and we're not going to be just having to press up and down on the chest. So, what's your chances of surviving a sudden cardiac arrest in the community? What do you think? So in the hospital, we said we're above average. What's your chance in the community of surviving cardiac arrest?
0.7.
Sorry?
0.7.
0.7.
0.7.
0.7, yeah. It's around about 10%. The National Statistics, the Research Council say 10% of the population will survive. So you're saying 7%, is that what you're saying?
No, I said fraction of percent.
Oh, a fraction of a percent.
Because my idea was 11 is in hospital.
No, so actually it's above that in hospital, because one thing about the hospital situation is we train all of our staff who come on induction how to do CPR. Okay, so let's go back a stage and say, what do you need to survive a cardiac arrest? You need somebody to find you when you've collapsed, or see you collapse, like somebody did recently in the table tennis centre. Did you see that on the media? Somebody collapsed while playing table tennis. They saw him collapse. Straight away they checked him and they realised he wasn't breathing. So they've made the guidelines for resuscitation a lot simpler over the years. If they're not breathing, they've got no signs of life, we need to start pressing on the chest. Just straight away doing this doubles your chance of survival. Just somebody doing this. It's not the thing that's going to revert their heart from this shaking, quivering mess of heart muscle that's not pumping any blood out, but it is the thing that is going to keep oxygen to the brain and oxygen to the heart muscle too, and the vital organs, especially the heart muscle. Because if we want to shock somebody, we need a heart muscle that's had some oxygen that's going to start working again afterwards. So double the chances. So they did. They started chest compression straight away. And this chap was doing that agonal respiration. He was going, opening his mouth, little noise, but no movement of air from the environment into his lungs. So they weren't sure whether they needed this, but there was one of these hanging on the wall from that poster to here away from him. So they got it off the wall, and there happened to be a lifeguard there, and he said, yes, we're going to use it, because that's a sign of cardiac arrest. So they stuck it on him, and they shocked him, and he came to hospital, and he's been discharged from hospital, and he's alive, and he doesn't mind us talking about his situation. Now that happened on the Thursday night, and on the Wednesday night, I went to the table tennis centre. That's the night before he had his, it's a bit of a funny thing, it's a bit of a jinxy thing to happen, but it did. I went there on the Wednesday night to offer them some training, because there are 3 buildings there. The table tennis centre, Next door to the table tennis centre is the indoor bowling centre. This is at the Marda Carteret type area. And alongside that is a gymnasium, which used to be the cricket centre. They've all got a defibrillator in each of those buildings. And when I went down to speak to the chap about doing some training, I said, let's go and have a look at all your defibrillators. Each building is locked, by the way. The doors are locked between each building. So when I walked in, the table tennis centre one, it had 1 month to go before it would not have worked. So I said to the chap, who's checking your defibrillator? Checking it? They don't check it. Oh my goodness, I was a bit worried about that. So we went to the one next door. It had expired a month ago and would not have worked. We went to the one next door. It expired 2 months ago. And they'd been on to St Johnson's, somebody to say, can you get it fixed? But nobody is checking the defibrillators. And that's a real problem. So this chap was not only lucky to collapse in the table tennis centre where the defib did work and survived, and he's been discharged and feeling great about it. The chances are he could have collapsed in one of those other buildings. So thankfully we've got them all changed from there. And the funny thing about, well, it's not a funny thing, but the thing about it was the chap who had the cardiac arrest was the chap who worked for the charity who bought the defibrillators and put them there in the first place. Yeah, so that's a coincidence for you.
Yeah.
So what we want is my role to link in with the ambulance service, the volunteers, the members of the public, and the health and social care. Because if we can get to somebody like that, then we're not going to have a bigger burden on the health and social care when we've got somebody who hasn't had any resuscitation, who has survived a cardiac arrest but has got long-term brain damage, and we're having to look after. So we need all to link in together. And thankfully, having come from the ambulance service background, the resuscitation officer and I have spent a lot of time standardising equipment around Guernsey. So we've got now the ambulance service using Zoll defibrillators, the hospital using Zoll defibrillators, and in the majority in the community we're using Zoll defibrillators now, so that they can just unplug their pads and plug them in and take the patient off to hospital with the same kind of defibrillator. Now, all AEDs, if I go too fast, I'm sorry, it's just I haven't got very long and I really want to tell you lots about it. All AEDs, it doesn't matter what manufacturer they are, they all work in the same manner. Turn them on, listen to what it tells you to do, and if it tells you to, apply the pads to the patient's chest, then apply the pads to the patient's chest, and then it will tell you to deliver a shock, then you press the button. It's as easy as that. They all work in the same manner, but we've chosen to use these because when we need a new set of batteries for these, we go down to Boots or a camera shop and we buy them from there. We don't have to send off to the UK to it. Not only that, there's a one-place pad placement that we put on the chest, and when they're doing their CPR, it says if they're not pressing hard enough, because they're going to fatigue after doing a bit of resuscitation, if they're not pressing hard enough, it will tell them to press harder, push harder, good compressions. Right, good, that's what we like. So your chance of survival is only about 10% in the UK, they're saying. We're just slightly above that in Guernsey, just slightly. And I know what the statistics are because I've got to try and prove that my role is going to make a difference to them. So for 5 years now, we've got 37 defibrillators that us, the Cardiac Action Group, have placed in the community. Have they been used, do you think?
Yes.
Yes. No. They haven't. Just this one that's just been used recently, they're not being used. Why are they not being used?
People don't know where they are.
They don't know where they are. So, who knows where there's one in Guernsey outside of the hospital?
Bathing pools.
The bathing pools, good answer. There is one at the bathing pools. And you know, the States and the whole island working together to have a good system here. The States of Guernsey were charging us £200 for planning permission for every defib we wanted to put in. Okay? And you don't need an exemption to have planning permission to have a fence, to have an electric box, to have a cigarette box on the outside of your wall, but you don't. To put a defibrillator on the wall of your building, you need to go through planning permission, and it takes 6 weeks to sort all that out. And it's a real problem. This is a life-saving bit of equipment, so we need to change the whole ethos about this life-saving equipment, because for every minute you don't get a shock from one of these, your chance of survival goes down by 10%. So we're in trouble. So 3 minutes, 30% less chance of survival. So there is one at the bathing pools. Do you know what the States of Guernsey said? You can't put a light on the top of it because it's got a little green light on the tiny little thing that flashes. You can't put the light on that one because it's not in keeping with the environment. The fact is, it's dark and nobody can see there. You want them to light up so that people know where they are. Yes, where's another one? Come on.
Jersey.
Villiers, did you say? Yes, we've just bought one of the Villiers garage. Just bought one of the Villiers garage.
Gerbox.
Jerbock, there's one, that's right. Well, just as you go on the cliff pass, yes.
Joseph's Catholic Church has got one.
Yes, good. Now, there are some people that have got their own defibrillators that are not a part of the Guernsey programme, the public access defibrillators. We want to prick the conscience of everybody who's got a defibrillator in Guernsey. So, if you've got one, tell people that you've got one by putting a sign on the outside of your door, and consider linking it in and marrying it with our community programme, so that the ambulance control centre, which we're strongly linked into, when you tell them somebody's collapsed by your church, they'll say, by the way, there's a defibrillator in that church, go and get it. This is where it is. And they've got the information for all of the pad sites that we've got in Guernsey.
There's two in Herm, but if you're in Herm and you're on the beach, you might have your mobile phone on you.
No. The good thing about Herm is, Herm are really good. Now you might have, the good thing about calling for help is mobile phones do make a difference. There's no doubt about that. This is my phone. Can you use my phone to make an emergency call?
Yes.
It needs my fingerprint.
No, because I can register.
No? Watch this. 5 presses on this button. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Up should come. Oh, it doesn't. Excuse me. Let me do that again. 5 presses. Oh, it still hasn't done it. It's because somebody sent me an invitation, that's why. Anyway, it will come up. Oh dear, oh dear. Let's try that again. Quicker, Mike. Okay. Make it work this time, Mike. Okay, I'll try. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Up comes. Turn off your phone. Medical ID. That's useful. About me. Might take my blood type and what I'm allergic to, those type of things. And SOS. Slide the SOS thing across and off you go, and then you can call. Or you press the button once and it says try again, you press it again, up comes the keypad, says emergency, you press that and it gets you through.
Are all mobile phones able to do that?
Not all at the moment. That works mostly on iPhones at the moment, but it's going to go across the board. One day when you get your phone, I've seen a defibrillator, an AED this big and that deep. One day when you get your phone, in the case of your phone, there'll be a set of pads, I reckon. This is how technology is going. No, I'm telling you what, there's hard evidence to prove that this makes a difference in a cardiac arrest, and the more of them. The reason people are not surviving in the community is because you have to normally wait for an ambulance to bring you a defibrillator, because most people don't collapse in public places like this chap did. They collapse at home at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we've got to wait for one to get to you. And they're coming down in price. When I first joined the ambulance service, we had one. £3,000 to get it to you. You had to go out in an ambulance to somebody's house, recognise their collapse, phone up and say I need a defibrillator. They put it in a car and bring it down to you. It never works.
My point was, the one place that you don't always have your mobile phone is when you've been anywhere near a beach.
Yes,
So
okay.
if you can't access it without a mobile phone, then
Okay, so what would you do? Sorry, I was coming back to that. It just takes me a little while to process information, but I was coming back to that. So, you go to the beach kiosk and you say, by the way, somebody's collapsed here. They've got communication around Herm like you wouldn't believe, because we've done a fair bit of training in Herm. They've got a manager in Herm who's very proactive, because they bought 2. And they've got jeeps and devices to take those defibrillators as fast as they can to different places in the island. Ideally, we'd like one by every beach. We'd like one by every beach in Guernsey. We haven't got one. You know,
You shout.
Sorry?
You shout.
Yeah, scream.
While you're doing the CPR,
Yeah, you
shout.
scream. And you send something to the beach kiosk. The beach kiosk contacts the manager and they bring one. But you know, 10 minutes with no shock from a defibrillator, you're probably going to be in a flat line or a non-shockable rhythm and not actually get that defibrillator to work properly. So it's a really tricky situation. But it's about making sure we've got more people who know how to do this. So in September, I'm going to go into all the schools, all year 8 and 9s, we just negotiated this, all year 9s are going to get CPR training and defibrillator training, and we're going to be supported by me and the St John organisation, because they're teaching first aid, which is a different thing to getting children to know about doing this and using a defibrillator. So that's why we're going to do the CPR bit, and we're going to wait till year 9 and not in the younger years, because it's quite traumatic to have them think about those type of things. But they're learning how to do recovery position and put bandages on and all that sort of stuff. So we're working with the other organisations in the island closely. So where else is there a defibrillator? Come on, there's 37 of them.
I saw one in Paul.
The co-op. Do you know the co-ops have been fantastic for us? 6 co-ops have got defibrillators on the outside of their walls or just inside their doors. What a fantastic thing that is. The co-ops are doing a great job with that. And now they're going to train their staff in how to use them. Now, if I'm just taking over this role, a part of my role is to teach people how to do this and use this. But another part of my role is to make sure if somebody phones up the ambulance joint control centre and says, I need a defibrillator, and there's one in the town church square, did you know that? Where is it? In the telephone box. Do you know people walk past it every day and don't even know that it's there? Okay, so if I've said to you, and I'm telling you this because I went to teach Tony and Guy's hairdresser, and they said to me, we were told to go to the telephone box in the town church square and get the defib, but they gave me the wrong code. Wow, that's a problem, isn't it? But not only that, what would happen if they opened the door and the defibrillator didn't work because nobody checked it properly? So I've gone around every single one of our 37 public access defibrillators, and I'm now going around the private ones that are inside people's buildings, and I'm making sure that the pads are in date, the batteries are in date, because the only maintenance for one of these is every 5 years you need a new set of batteries and a new set of pads, £115, and that's it for 10 years. 5 years for the battery, the cover the last 10 years, the defib will last 10 years. Yes, inside here, we only want a defibrillator. So what I've done is I've taken out all the junk. There's a lot of junk. We want somebody to open the door, grab the defib and take it. That's what we want. And we want to make sure it's in working condition. And unfortunately, some of these privately owned ones aren't getting checked by people. So one of my objectives is to make sure that we offer training to people, and also we encourage them to check them. So we've got guardians for every single one of ours, and when they check a defibrillator, like this morning I had a thing to say, one of them hasn't been checked at one of the football pitches, so I went and checked it myself. So we are all working together now to try to save somebody's life by making sure that they get one of these or anything that they've got applied to the patient's chest as quickly as possible and used properly. But people are frightened about doing it wrong, making a mistake and getting sued. So what can you be sued for, team, if you're going to do CPR? Assault and battery. They're the two things that somebody could try to sue you for doing resuscitation. Now, thankfully, if you follow the guidelines for resuscitation, the resuscitation councils around the world create, you won't get somebody fining you for assault and battery. Because the first question we say to somebody who's collapsed is, hello, Bob. Hello, Vicky. Open your eyes. We shout at them. Okay, that's asking for permission to touch them before we touch them. So we do that. So it's very important that we do that before we actually touch them. So we've got to push this message to people. The other thing is we're going to press up and down on their chest, hard and fast. How far down are you going to press up on somebody's chest, team? A third is not right, actually. That's another problem we got, is people have their ideas about what the guidelines don't say. I wish they did say a third, and they might eventually, but at the moment they don't say that for adults. They say 2/3. They don't say 2/3 either. They say, come on, healthcare professionals, 5 to 6 centimetres, Eve. Well done. That's a really good answer. I knew you knew it. 5 to 6 centimetres, they say, to breast. In old money, that's 2.5 inches. You know, so it's a fair amount of pressure on the chest. But that's what the guidelines say. Press hard and press fast. So as long as your hands are in roughly the right place and you're not pressing on the rib cage, you are limiting the risk of you causing them any damage. But what they have to do is they have to prove that you made their condition worse to be able to sue you. What's worse than being collapsed on the floor with no breathing, unconscious? You know, there's not much. So that's why in Europe, people are not being sued for doing resuscitation. Yes, we can break a rib, we can. But they survived a cardiac arrest. You know, that's a really lucky thing for them to happen. So on the back of all of this, we have to push the message out to members of the public that we're doing this. So we're going to go in October, and if any of you want to help me with this, please just let me know and I'll incorporate you to come and help me. We're going to do something that the Resuscitation Council and the British Heart Foundation is doing something called Restart a Heart Day on October the 16th. It says day or surrounding time. So we're going to spend a week, and I'm going to go to every single community centre in Guernsey for 2 hours on a set day that suits them, and we're going to get them to publicise to all the community people that are around there, like the Villette are doing, because we've just put a defibrillator in the Villette. They're going to ask all the people around there, do you want free training? Come to your community centre, and we'll get around the whole island then, and we'll train as many people as we can on how to do it. Whether it's a talk, because some people won't want to practice, or whether it's a talk and practice, they can choose either. And that's our way of pushing our message across, is to tell people. So, I don't know if you've seen my little shiny car outside there, have you? Yeah. People say, oh, you're lucky, you've got a car. It's too small, but it's a car. It's a colour that's going, yes, it's blood red, I know, something I like, a red car. But it's red, It's got our signs all over it. It says we're doing free training, and I'm driving it as often as I can around so that people can see it and say, you know, can we have some of that? Yes, you can. So I put these forms in, not because you need to, although it sounds like you might do after some of your answers today. This is free training for anybody. Okay, if you know groups of people who want us to come, just fill in this form and send it to the Cardiac Action Group. I've got an old lady, she's sitting quite close, she answers all these emails and she sends it to me. From the Cardiac Action Group, and we will go and deliver training for anybody who wants it. And we're only doing this for 2 days a week, and we're already doing more hours than I'm getting paid for, but it's growing. It's an important thing, but it's growing. We need members of the public. So in hospital, the chain of survival means putting the medical emergency team, the emergency teams, and the defibrillators all together very quickly. In a community, the chain of survival, the most important link in a community really is finding somebody and starting to press on the chest. That's the first thing. Once we've got that going, then we get the defibrillator on them as fast as we can. So we need more of them. So since I've been in place, I've got to prove that we're making a difference in Guernsey. It's going to be difficult to do, but since I've been in place, we're already negotiating 12 defibrillators that are going to go in the community since December, since I've been in place. More than were there already. So we went to Babes, just to give you an idea, Babes, First National Bank, Leapfrog and Moores, and they've clubbed together £2,600 and they're going to buy a defibrillator, and we're going to put it, and Christie's put some money in, we're going to put it outside their building there at that end of the town, because the town Church Square's got it and that end of the town's got it. Generali, one of the insurance companies, are going to take their defibrillator that they've had inside their building for years but nobody knew they had it, and they're going to put it outside the OGH, linking in with the OGH, and we're going to train all of their staff. Their volunteers are going to, they've made it a protocol now that all staff will do their training, will do this training. And we can do it and offer it because it's free whenever they want it, you know, so that's kind of cool too. Anyway, I'm going to run out of time. I had a lot more to talk about. How do you get one of the defibrillators out of one of these boxes? You have to phone the ambulance service and they give you a code. When they give you the code, you just punch in 4 digits, open the door, grab the defib and take it to where you want it to go to. And then the linking in with us, with the ambulance service and the volunteers and the first responders, the ambulance service will make sure it goes back in the box with a new set of pads ready to go before they go back to the ambulance service station. Does that make sense?
Mike, how much of the protocol do you have to go through with Jessup before you can get the defib? Because sometimes they've got quite a lot of questions to ask.
Yes, so that's a good point. So if you phone up and you say I've got a broken leg, it can take up to 2.5 minutes to make an emergency call. They ask you a lot of questions. It's a computer-based thing. When I worked for the ambulance service and we answered the phone, we had experience about how to respond to an emergency, so we knew what was going on and we dispatched the ambulance while we're talking to you. 90 seconds, they've told me, is what it takes from the time you start making the call and you say somebody's not showing any signs of life till the time they dispatch the ambulance. 90 seconds. That's 1.5 minutes. That is already, you know, a percentage of 15% less chance of surviving from the time you've made the call. So yes, we'd like that to be shorter, but they need to know. They won't give you the code. If you say somebody's having a heart attack, they got pains in their chest, they won't give, somebody complained to us, why didn't they give us a code? Somebody's having a heart attack. Because the indications for using one of these is, they must be unconscious, not showing any signs of life. That means not breathing, as far as members of the public. So, yeah, it's a little while, unfortunately. How can we make that quicker? I think they're making it quicker as we go on, but they have to go from one screen to another screen to another screen. It's a tricky thing. But that's better than 2.5 minutes, isn't it? Yes, see.
You said that apart from that one occasion at the table tennis centre, that the defib hadn't been used, even although you've got a lot of them around.
Yes.
Is it just people's awareness that needs raising?
Yes, it
about
is.
using it?
That's one of the things. So, last year we sent out 26,000 of these to people's houses. Did you get one?
Yes.
Some yes, some no. Okay. Inside this is a map of where they are. But there's enough for each one of you to take one of these with you. Okay, there's 37 in there. We're already about to put another 10 or 12 around, and we're going to put a lot more around. A lot of them got put in junk mail and not even got opened, unfortunately. Yeah, I turned it up the other way. It doesn't matter. They're there anyway. And on the front, there's the 10 that are owned by the States of Guernsey that are down by the harbour there that are locked in buildings apart from one. You know, so we want people to... So every single session I do, we talk about where they are in Guernsey, we give them one of these, and we ask them questions like I asked you, you know, for an hour I've got, and I do spend 5 minutes very importantly talking about that and how to get them out of the boxes. Because we need, you're absolutely right, we need it. Yes, Mark?
Can I just expand on the answer, Mike, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
So we had 3 cardiac arrests in the community where we placed a pad site. So we had a teacher collapse in class at the Armada Cartrip. We had a teacher collapse, I don't think it's healthy being a teacher, but one collapse at the grammar school.
Yeah.
We had another guy playing cricket behind the grammar school, and they were in an earshot of all 3 defibrillators, but they didn't know they were there.
Yeah, and the terrace, somebody collapsed on the terrace, same thing. You're absolutely right. It's about making sure that they're aware that they're there, and sharing of information. So we're going to do a lot of media. We're going to go to all the shows. We're going to spend as much time as we can trying to make people aware of where they are. Hopefully, we'll get the message across, and they'll start. The reason that they're not being used is people are unaware that they're there. Once we start getting them used, we'll know that we're doing a good job. As an organisation, as an island.
May I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Have you thought of contacting the Island FM?
Yes. So
it's on everywhere.
Yes.
Go,
So
in all the shops,
we're
everywhere.
very aware. So when we first got the car and I first started in my position, we invited all the media down, and they came down and we did a demonstration, and they filmed it, and they showed nothing to do with the demonstration. They showed 5 seconds or 10 seconds of our television bit. The press wrote what they wanted to write, which cut down all the things. We are going to go to each one of them individually. So what I did is I went to Island FM and I knocked on their door and I said, would you like me to do a demonstration on how to do this for you and your staff, so that if something were to happen because you've got defibrillators close? They said, yes, what a great idea. And while you're doing it, we'll interview you. I said, oh, that's a good idea. So you're right. We're going to go back and start it. We're trying to do it not all in one go, because there is an event that we're connected to next week that's going to happen. The ambulance service are doing a 24-hour CPR thing, and we're involved with that. So I don't want to distract from that, because that's a really good cause that they're doing. But we are going to go to each one of the media individually, and we're also going to go to the deputies that are in charge of health and the deputies in the island, Gavin St Pierre's and the Heidi Salisbury's, and all the top people in the health and social care, to say to them what our message is and how they can help us to actually... Last week, a couple of weeks ago, I went down to teach the law officers in the courthouse, right next door to where the States of Guernsey were talking about, right next door it was, I could hear them talking about it, about assisted dying and death. They were talking about that, and we were next door doing resuscitation, which was a bit ironic really when you think about it. But the law officers, what we'd like to do is get the law officers to say, if you have more than so many people in a building, you'll have a fire extinguisher, you'll have a first aid kit and first aiders, and you'll have a defibrillator. Because if we can get that sort of thing changed, we'll make a big difference. We will.
Offered to go and do the training for the planning department, so that
Yes.
the idea.
Do you know we have to take pictures. We take pictures, and it takes a lot of time. That lady was there now. She does a lot of the background stuff voluntarily behind everybody's back there. 4 copies of every single planning that we have to put in, and then if they don't like it, we have to put a sign up on the wall and wait 21 days for anybody to object to it before we can do it. Isn't that sad? That we've got to do that. With a computerised thing now, we should be able to just send one set of pictures in, and they just do it on a computer and save paper and not have to do all those things. Everything's a battle, but we will get there. We will teach them the value of it. Absolutely right. And the simple fact is that this is simple to do, and this is simple to use. And these are cheaper in price than they ever were before. You can buy one of these for £975, and to put it in a box it costs £2,500. But the States of Guernsey think that because we raised money from the different organisations that gave us some funding, and we're just about to put another one, the lottery have given us some money to buy one, thankfully, they think we own them, and they're ours, and in 10 years' time we're just going to replace them and buy new ones. The people need to take ownership of the defibrillators, and then a year before they run out of date, which is 10 years, we need to say that they need to be looking at how can we raise funds to buy another one and replace it. They'll be this big in 10 years' time. Maybe we'll all when we're born.
They're not
Yeah,
into it.
it'll say press here on your chest and you'll have a defib attached to your heart when you're born then. Hey, that'll be funny. Okay, any questions? I'm sorry, I tried to rush everything a little bit.
You have to have a mobile phone together. I mean, they just get
Any phone.
vandalised.
Any
They
phone.
just get
No,
vandalised.
ours does not. We checked.
Oh, you
iPhone
mean-
does.
Mine
Ours not.
does. I just
Yes,
tried it.
yes, good, well done. The reason they're locked, we'd like to put them in non-lockable cupboards, but unfortunately somebody's going to steal them, that's our problem, and vandalise them. We've had a couple of boxes. In the future, we won't need to lock them. When people are aware that you can't abuse them, they only get used for this. We've had some stolen. I had one stolen from one of the ambulances I was in once, and it was stolen because somebody thought it had drugs in it. You know, people don't know that you can only use them for the right purposes. So we'd like them to be in non-lockable boxes, but we can't do that at the moment. So you still need the ambulance to come along and stick tubes down their throats and take them to hospital where they're going to be in intensive care for a few days, being supported and ventilated and looked after, because they don't, like they do on the TV, as I'm sure you're all aware, they don't just wake up and say, thank you very much, let's go and have lunch. You know, they end up a couple of days unconscious, and sometimes they're going to be a big burn for us because they'll have a lot of brain damage because nobody's done anything before they've arrived. You know, it's been a long time.